yeah, the last book, oh wait, that was the last book that I read. Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video I'm going to be filming my monthly reading wrap up for the month of May. I read a lot of good books this month. I actually didn't have any 5-star reads, which is super unusual for me because usually there's at least one, but I just wasn't feeling anything enough to give it a 5-star. There was definitely some ones that were almost there but just didn't quite make it. So yeah, this will be my first month with no 5-star reads, but I did read some amazing books that I really enjoyed this month. And yeah, before we get into the video, I want to announce I did get a haircut. If you haven't seen my Queensland vlog, the videos before that were all pre-filmed, but I got my hair cut. It's short. I don't know how I feel about it. I also got my nose pierced, so there's that too. We're just all new person. Let's just go ahead and get into all the books that I read in the month of May. So I'm gonna start off with the 3 books that I read physically, and the first one was a highly anticipated read for me, and that is Book Lovers by Emily Henry, her most recent release and her 3rd novel, and I gave this one 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed it. Did I give it 4.5 or 4? Oh, 4 stars. I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it, but I have a love-hate relationship with Emily Henry's writing. She's not my favorite author to read for just a fun like romance read. A lot of her books are a mix of literary fiction and romance, and that's not really my like style because I get a bit bored, and this did take me a while to get into it, but once I got into it I loved it, and I love Charlie, and it was just such a good book. And yeah, the only reason that it didn't get the full 5 stars for me was because I didn't love like the start of the book was a bit slow, and then also I didn't like the epilogue. I just was really confused and it didn't really make any sense. But other than that, I really loved it, and it's definitely my favorite Emily Henry book I think I've read, because I've read People We Meet on Vacation and I didn't like it, and I'm reading Beach Read at the moment and I'm enjoying it, but it's really slow and hard for me like to get into it. Like I'm not like obsessed with it, but I really did enjoy this one, and yeah, I gave it 4 stars. And then the next book I read was definitely my favorite book of the month, and that was Better Than the Movies by Liz Painter. This is a YA novel and I loved it. I gave it 4.75 stars. It wasn't quite the full 5 stars for me because the main character Liz frustrated the heck out of me. She was just so irritating at times, and she just kept like lying, and it was just very frustrating. But other than that, I really enjoyed this book. So this follows Liz and Wes, and basically Liz is a hopeless romantic. She loves rom-coms because her mum loved rom-coms and they used to watch them together, and her mother passed away a couple of years ago, and she's just been obsessed with rom-coms. And you can tell by the cover there's some iconic scenes from iconic movies on there, and each chapter has a movie quote which I loved. And she has this crush on a guy who moved out of town and then recently moved back, and she's been like basically in love with him since they were younger, but he's never really noticed her, and she wants to have her movie moment. She wants to go to prom with him, and so she gets the help of her enemy Wes, who is her next door neighbor, and her enemy, they do not get along, they do not like each other, and she asks him for help to get the guy because Wes is friends with this guy, and you know, he's popular, he can get her in with that crowd, get her in with the guy, and basically gives her a bit of a makeover. It's kind of like the movie The Duff. If you guys have seen The Duff, it's kind of basically that but different. And so if you like that movie, you'll definitely love this book. And yeah, so basically he helps her, and then she kind of realizes that maybe she doesn't want that guy anymore. Maybe she kind of wants Wes, and Wes is literally the sweetest. I'm obsessed with him, and I would love to have his point of view because this is only told in one POV, but I love Wes. I loved them. They were so cute together, and just like the whole like all the movie references, and it was just so good. And yeah, I gave it 4.75 stars. Really enjoyed this one. And the last paperback that I read this month was Before We Were Strangers by Renee Carlino. Finally, I read this book and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I don't know why. I was just like not loving anything like as much as I wanted to this month, but I really did enjoy this one. It's about Matt and Grace, and basically they met in college and became fast friends, or as Matt would say, more. That's a quote from the book. And they become friends, and then that turns into more, and they have a relationship, and then they have a falling out, and it's been 15 years and they haven't seen each other in these 15 years, but then they run into each other on the subway and they end up reconnecting through this, and you know, it's a second chance romance, friends to lovers, so good. And I just really enjoyed this one. Matt is the sweetest. He's so in love with Grace and just like worships the ground that she walks on. They are soulmates and it was just so good. And I love the way this book was told. So basically the first maybe 4 or 5 chapters are told in the present timeline, and you see them, you know, run into each other, and then it goes back in time 15 years, and then you get like the whole middle chunk of the book is from the past, and you get their whole love story in the past and how they met and how they fell in love 15 years ago, and then you fast forward to the future again with them reconnecting, and it was really good. I've never read a second chance romance told done like that. Usually it's like flipping between past and present perspective, but I really liked how this one was written, and I really enjoyed Renee Carlino's writing style, and I definitely want to read more from her. And yeah, I really enjoyed this one and I gave it 4 stars. Moving on to the books that I read on my Kindle. The first 2 books that I read this month were the first 2 books in the Element series by Britney C Cherry. You guys know I've read the last 2 books in that series and they're 2 of my favorites, but I read it out of order because they're all complete standalones, and they're not even like interconnected standalones. They're all complete standalones that have none of the same characters in any of the books, so you can read them all as standalones or you can read them all together, or like it doesn't really matter. So I read the first 2 in this series because I really love Britney C Cherry's writing. So the first one is The Air He Breathes, and I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. And the only reason it wasn't the full 5 is because the characters basically used each other. I didn't really like that aspect, so that's the only reason it wasn't a 5-star for me. But basically this follows Tristan and Elizabeth, and Tristan basically lost his wife when a couple of years ago, and he is grieving. He is going through a really tough time. He's kind of closed himself off to the world, and he's this like grumpy man who kind of lives alone, isolates himself. And then Elizabeth moves in next door to him, and she is sunshiny and happy, but she is going through a lot. She just lost her husband and she's raising a daughter on her own, and so it is single parent, and she's really struggling. And basically they end up meeting in a interesting way, and then they kind of to run into each other a lot. They're like in the same town, it's a small town, they're living next door to each other obviously, and slowly they start to build this connection and things start to happen between them. And it's definitely grumpy sunshine. He hates everyone in the world but her, and it's just really good, and they build this relationship. This book is heartbreaking, and as most of Britney C Cherry's books are, but I really enjoyed it. And the aspect of the feathers, like for the air he breathes, like I really enjoyed that aspect, and I just loved them. The quotes in this book, phenomenal, and their relationship, their romance was literally so sweet, and the way like this book deals with grief, so it was just really good. I really enjoyed it. And then I read The Fire Between High and Low, which is the second book. This one is a childhood friends to lovers second chance romance, and this follows Alyssa and Logan. Basically they meet when they were younger. I believe they're like 16, 17, and they become like best friends. He is from like the wrong side of the tracks. He didn't come from a lot. His mum's like a drug addict. He just has like a shitty past, and he meets Alyssa, and Alyssa's basically like the light in his life, and they become really good friends. But they're both kind of in love with each other, but they never really do anything about it. And then one day they kind of realize, admit their feelings, and they start a relationship. But then something happens and everything kind of goes downhill. And then you fast forward, I'm not sure how many years later, you fast forward a few years later, and basically Lo is really struggling, and so that's why like they had to like kind of call it off, and he went to rehab. He was struggling with drugs and everything like that, and so he comes back for his brother's wedding a couple of years later, and Alyssa absolutely despises his existence. She doesn't want anything to do with him, and he understands that reason, but he's also so like still so in love with her, and they basically, you know, start seeing each other and all the time around the town, and slowly, you know, fall back in love. And I really love this book. It's really good. I gave it 4.5 stars. It was really good. I love childhood friends to lovers second chance. It's one of my favorite tropes ever. Next 2 books I read this month were actually part of a series, and that is Praise and Eyes on Me by Sarah Kate. So the first book I read was Praise, and I loved this one. It basically is a ex-boyfriend's dad romance, so kind of like Birthday Girl vibes, but like different. And these books are super like steamy, spicy, smutty, super fun, but they do still have that plot. But if you're looking for something that's very like smutty, these are the books for you. and it's like, it's good spice, but it definitely still does have that plot there. So basically the first book, Praise, follows Emerson and Charlie, and Emerson is her ex-boyfriend's dad, and basically her and her boyfriend had a fight, they broke up, he's kind of a dick, and she needs her half of the money or something that her ex-boyfriend owed her, and his dad has it, but he doesn't have a good relationship with his dad, so he was like, Charlie, you go get it. And so she ends up going over to his house and getting this money, and then he ends up hiring her as his like personal assistant, and he runs a business. So it basically started off as this like dating app where you could, you know, match with people who had the same kinks as you, and then it turned into this like sex club type of thing. And so they run this club, him and his like group of friends, and there's going to be a book about every person in their friend group. And they run this club, and it's basically where you can go and you can meet people who have the same kinks as you, and you can like express your kinks. It's like a safe place for everything, and there's no judgment, and it's like, it's really good. And so that's his job, but she ends up being his personal assistant, and she has a hardcore praise kink. That's why it's called Praise. And anyway, there's so much tension between them, and it's kind of like dominant submissive type of thing. It does deal with like a little bit of BDSM, so he's like a dom, she's a sub, and it kind of goes through that a little bit, and that's kind of how their relationship starts. And they end up like falling in love and whatever, and it's really good, and I really enjoyed this one, and I gave it 4 stars. Oh no, 4.25 stars. I really enjoyed this one. And then I read Eyes on Me, which is the second book in the series, and it follows Garrett, who is Emerson's best friend, and his relationship with his stepsister. So basically Garrett has a voyeur kink. He likes to watch people, and that's like his kink, and that's how he got like, you know, into the club and everything like that. And his stepsister Mia, they do not like each other. I believe that he got into their family when he was about 20 and she was maybe 12 or 13, so like they didn't like grow up together, so it's not like weird, and obviously they're not related, like they're step siblings. And so he ends up going on this website to like watch like cam girls, and Mia is a cam girl, and he ends up stumbling across her profile and doesn't realize it's her at first, and then like he's like, oh shit, like this is my stepsister, like this is weird, but he also can't stop watching. And then it's kind of forced proximity because he ends up going to stay at their holiday house with them, and they're like around each other all the time, and there's tension there because obviously he's like seen her on like the cam girl website, and there's like a lot of tension, and eventually things happen, and it's really good. And also these characters have like depth to them as well, like it's not just like surface level, just like pure smart. There is depth to the characters, and there is plot there, and both the characters are kind of dealing with like a lot of their own like stuff, and it's about, you know, like finding yourself and your sexuality and becoming comfortable with who you are and stuff like that. And it's like really good, and I can't wait for the third book, which comes out later this year I believe, because that book's going to be about Hunter and Drake, who are best friends, and Hunter's married to Isabel, who is like his childhood like sweetheart, and Drake has always kind of been attracted to Isabel but been attracted to Hunter, and so it's gonna be like a threesome type of book thing, and I'm really excited for that one. And then there's gonna be a 4th book as well, because there's a 4th member of like the friendship group, Maggie, and so I don't know who her love interest is gonna be, but I'm excited for the rest of the series because I really enjoyed this one surprisingly, and yeah, they're really good. And the next book that I read was The Wrong Heart by Jennifer Hartman. You guys know Still Beating and Lotus are 2 of my favorite books of all time by Jennifer Hartman. I love those books, and I was really excited to read this one because the concept was so cool, but it was just a bit of a letdown. I originally gave it 4 stars, but I actually think I'm going to change my rating to a 3, just because I didn't love it as much as I wanted to. Like, I loved the start of it, and then it got to the point of the plot twist, and I just felt like the plot twist was really unnecessary. Like, the plot twist shook me, but in a really bad way. Like, I didn't like want that to happen because it kind of just ruined the book for me, and I didn't like it, and I was like, oh, why? Like, why did you have to do that? But I really loved their romance, and I really loved like the whole book until that point. So basically this is about Parker and Melody, and they are both dealing with a lot of shit. Basically Melody lost her husband in a car accident, and she is grieving really hard, and this book does deal with self-harm and suicide, so definitely trigger warning for that. If that triggers you, definitely don't read these books. And she ends up trying to kill herself, and so as like part of her recovery she has to go to these meetings with a bunch of people who are all kind of in the same situation. They've all like tried to, you know, commit suicide and are all like kind of healing from that. It's like a support group, and Parker is part of this group, and he is grumpy as anything. He hates life, he doesn't want to be there, he's only there for his sister, and he doesn't want to associate with any of these people. He's the grumpiest man, and Melody is pure sunshine. She is happy despite her situation, and she tries, you know, to lighten up everyone's day. And they end up, you know, seeing each other, and basically Melody's husband was a like organ donor, and so he was like on the list when he died. He ended up giving his heart to someone, and that someone is Parker. And so they end up connecting online but anonymously, and so it's one of those books where they know each other online and they know each other in real life, but they don't know it's the same person. And so they're talking online and they're getting to know each other, and they're like building this connection, but then they're also getting to know each other in real life. And so she's talking to this guy who has her husband's heart, and she's kind of like falling for him, and she's also getting to know Parker. And yeah, it's a really good book up until a certain point, and I was really disappointed with like that whole plot twist and like ending that I didn't really like. But yeah, it's such an interesting concept. Like, you know, she starts talking to the guy who, you know, has her husband's heart, and it was really good, and then it just went downhill, and I was really disappointed because I really wanted to love it. But I really do like Jennifer Hartman's writing style, and I love the characters, and their romance was super sweet, and the quotes were everything. There was so many good quotes that I highlighted when I was reading this book, and yeah, but it didn't hit for me, unfortunately. But yeah, the last book, oh wait, that was the last book that I read because I'm currently reading Beach Read by Emily Henry, and I still have like 150 pages left, so I'm probably not going to finish it by the end of the month. So I will talk about that book in my next month wrap up. But that is all the books that I read this month. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video and seeing all the books that I read in the month of May. And yeah, make sure you give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed. Subscribe to my channel if you're not already, and I will see you guys in my next one. Bye guys.